Shall I jump in, guys? I kind of figure that everyone's sick to the back teeth of hearing about the skill shortage. So I don't think we're going to educate anybody about trends, be it what we've seen or what we're going to see in terms of skill shortage. That's clearly here. But I think what we're clearly feeling as kind of leaders is actually the impact of the skill shortage, and finding people is not any more easy or hard than it used to be. There's less people around, definitely, but there's certainly people available. But the skill shortage is actually a whole list of different things that tend to come into effect. I don't know if you would agree with that, you two.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the skills shortage is nothing new, right? So it's just personified at the moment because the world has come back to life all at the same time, whereas there was that sort of circular motion where companies go through peaks and troughs of growth, and they tend to have push and pull factors that are available to them when attracting talent. Whereas now is that everybody needs talent, everyone needs it now, and everyone seems to be focused on attracting talent right now. So there has to be another solution, because there's only so many people in the market, and there's more jobs than there are people. So there has to be another solution. And and that's why everyone's sick to the back teeth of it. Everyone knows that. So salaries are going up, because that's one thing that you can adjust really, really quickly, or not, as the case may be in some organizations. The other thing is to start to train your existing people. I mean, more often than not, you've got talent in your business, and yet everyone seems to be focused of looking for new talent outside the business. Upskilling is one of the best ways to develop and nurture talent that's in your business. And let's make sure we get clear definition on the word talent and skill shortage, right? Talent are good people that work for your business. Skills are the things that they bring. You can train skills, you can't always train talent, and talent is unique to your business. And I think that's a really clear definition that people need to get in their mind. There isn't a talent shortage. There's lots of talent out there. There is a skill shortage, and skills are something that can be trained really, really easily.
It's probably just worth mentioning the skill shortage. Pete, you just mentioned there, everybody effectively came back to work at the same time on the same day, and almost started hiring on the same day at the same time. So the kind of volume of opportunity kind of hit us immediately. But we also had, and by no means is this a kind of anti-Brexit thing, but we also had the Brexit impact where lots of European candidates went back home to their various countries in continental Europe. I think we've stopped, for various reasons, attracting those people into the UK for working visas. We've had a massive change in the UK visa system, which, as promised, will get fixed, but it's not been fixed at the minute. And that's actually stopped a vast amount of people coming either from India or Africa, as we've seen in the past, with incredibly good skills. So there's actually a perfect storm of candidates that we're left with, effectively UK-based candidates with more choices than they've ever had. I mean, it's bizarre to talk to somebody that's not in process with 7-8 different jobs. Often those people are actually in work, and I suppose therein lies the interesting point is you probably have got members of staff at the minute that are either looking, about to look, or actually are in process, which kind of begs the question, don't ignore this, actually, what can you do to actually retain your staff? Because it's going to come to you at some point, and us as recruiters, it's our job to effectively lever them out of your business. Often are we told that people are not looking, they're perfectly happy, really love their company. It's actually quite refreshing to hear when people say it to us, isn't it? It's quite interesting. You get that, I kind of like where I work, I like who I work for, I like what I do. However, I suspect 75% of the other conversations are, what have you got? And yes, I'm interested. And be under no illusions. And if you're even a manager, I suspect that you're open to that opportunity as well to some degree. So I think everyone has to be aware that everyone is looking. And if you accept that, then actually you can start doing things around protecting yourself against it.
Yeah, good point, guys. Yeah, I know kind of we've spoken about it before, where we've spoken about what is your EVP, so employee value proposition. You talk about staff retention there. And Pete's mentioned the upskilling in other areas as well, but it is really, really important to kind of look after your staff. I suppose the other solution in terms of skill shortages, what do you do around, I suppose, attracting kind of people to your business? We've spoken about the EVP, but what does your brand look like outside of your normal world? Who are you talking to? have you got just a good local footprint, or are you kind of looking at what is available to you now? If you're offering fully remote opportunities, you're looking at UK wide. So for me, that's kind of a really important factor. If you're looking at that skill shortage, are you flexible enough to, I suppose, look at talent across the country rather than just in your region?
Well, we've seen it quite a lot. I mean, it is a really, really blunt tool to keep on increasing salary. I mean, it's the bluntest tool that you can use. We've seen a vast amount of kind of increased salaries, and just about every job is kind of climbing through the roof in terms of salary increases. And listen, people are more than aware that people are getting, dare I say, overpaid or just being paid an extortionate amount of money because of the shortage of that particular skill set or talent. But I think more interestingly it's the blunt tool that can't be used forever. And actually, you've got to almost wind back from that position to kind of pay a fair salary for the right skill. But what else can you plug into that opportunity that actually makes it feel quite appealing and compelling to join? And I think that's where kind of post-COVID some companies have got it absolutely right, but some companies are struggling to work out what does the proposition really look like in our business other than the blunt tool, I'll give you £20,000 more. Because that doesn't last forever. I mean, that's going to run out of steam sooner rather than later, or you'll get outbid by the next big company. But I think your point, Pete, there is kind of bang on point, that we're fishing out of a really small pool at the minute. And, we're basically fishing out of the UK pool of candidates. And, there might be a point where you've really got to consider, I mean, there's loads of levers to pull. Guys, companies, how many companies have truly gone out there and investigated whether they can offer sponsorship, for example? Now, it's expensive, but you know what, if you can, you quite literally open yourself up to the world of employees. So at some point, someone's going to have to sit there and say, actually, it's a pain to do it, but it might be something that we need to do. It may well be satellite offices in Europe. It may be satellite offices somewhere else in the world, or partnerships. But fundamentally, I think the idea that we're going to revert back to post-COVID or pre-COVID rather is naive at best. But I think actually the trends are bedded in now. I think the trends are bedded in with candidates. We see it all the time, don't we? Candidates quite literally now it's not what salary have you got to offer, what is the remote working policy? And that isn't an ambiguous, it looks a bit like that today. They kind of want to know, employment contract wise, what does it really look like? You'll go into the office every now and again, or as and when, and rightly so, people are challenges saying, well, what is as and when, or what is on occasional? They want some real tangibles to kind of sit there and say, I'll evaluate that job based on what you've just told me. And some companies have nailed it and are really clear, and some companies are still flirting with the idea and not quite committed. We're seeing this a lot, aren't we? We get a lot of rejections based on that non-committal.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult point, isn't it? That's where a lot of companies struggle, and they find that they can't compete, that lack of clarity. I mean, we've got clients who are, as you say, they're quite ambiguous in terms of their remote or their work from home policy, and they just get blown out of the water by people that are either fully remote or a really well defined set of kind of office stroke work from home processes and policies.
Yeah, I think I think with the whole what we're talking about here, a lot of it is around focusing on the people you've got, right? And actually, yes, you've got to attract new talent. That's just the way of the world. But you first and foremost, you've got to put a wrap around the people that you've got, and that means increasing those employee value propositions. If you think back, 4 or 5 years ago now, the whole flexible working remotely, was one of those it was almost exclusive to the this SME startup world, where it's all cool. It's all like, come on, let's just work when we work and not when we're not. That benefit is gone now. Everybody in the world is doing remote working, flexible working, mental health, work-life balance. It's no longer just about that. It's about everything else you wrap around that. And maybe we're seeing that shift towards, back towards those larger organizations, those larger employers that can really scale these things very, very quickly. And actually the smaller SMEs and startup environments are having to, it's more around the job itself, the actual content of the job. But there are large organizations, it's about that job security, it's about that extended EVP, and it's about offering that sort of flexible working pattern, but also with a career trajectory as well.
You can't ignore the fact that to attract talent and skills and all that good stuff, you've got to do your traditional recruitment stuff. But I think there's a real interesting dynamic that happens, that because we're pretty much remote, but yet we still kind of habitually use the same interview processes. We still use habitually the same, I'll take a week to second interview. Quite simply, it's a competition for talent at the minute, and there's no other way to explain it. It is absolutely a competition for talent, and be under no illusion, if you like that person, 7 or 8 other companies will like that person as well. So you don't necessarily have the time to kind of sit and procrastinate, and I don't mean that rudely, but you don't have the time to kind of sit and think about it for a week. And actually, to some degree, is it necessary to think about it for a week? You know, if you actually like your candidate in that discovery call, that early introduction call, it begs the question why actually you're waiting another week to interview them for a second if you've got other candidates in process. You know, the challenge is, why wouldn't you second interview them tomorrow and third interview them necessarily on the Wednesday? You know, and that kind of run of 3 days, nothing really changes. And that 3 days effectively gives you access to the best talent immediately. And that sounds ridiculous given some years ago, I think time to hire was 12 weeks. It came down to about 8 weeks. Time to hire in our world at the minute with the really good companies that are hiring lots of people is as short as a week, and often shorter. And it's quite simply because they've worked out that the best talent goes quick. You know, too often we've got clients that come back to us a week and a half later and actually feedback on a CV or feedback on an interview. And I think clients have got to accept that actually us as recruiters pushing for speed isn't pushing for a quick fee. Us pushing for that talent is firstly because they were hard to find, and bloody hard to find in most cases. Secondly, they're engaged in your brand. Thirdly, take them off the market. They will see in that week another 4 or 5 opportunities. So actually getting that candidate engagement is often actually done through speed. Don't let them get kind of caught up with the next shiny thing that comes across their desk. So if we kind of tell anyone to do anything at the minute, it's just do things really, really quickly. You're not waiting for them to kind of take a week off or take a week to get into the office or kind of put something in their diary. Most people will be available at 8 o'clock in the morning or at 5:30 at night, or at lunchtime. That bit of flexibility and pace will get you the access to the best talent very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think which leads itself perfectly to, you know, doing, you know, so we've talked about employee retention, we've talked about engaging them now as quickly as possible, and now you've got to put that into, you know, a first-class candidate experience. You've got to, you know, got to give them that all of those things that normally you take 2 or 3 weeks to do. You know, you've got to do that quickly within 1 to 2 weeks now. You know, maximum. You know, if you want to get hold of the best talent fast, which means you either need to, you know, more time, which most of us haven't got at the minute. You need better tech stacks, or you need a partner to help you deliver that candidate experience. You know, and that's where, you know, recruiters like us come in. A good recruiter will extend your candidate experience. You know, represent your brand to the candidate market, maintain that high touch that's needed over that 2-week period. Because guess what? You know, 10 other recruiters and 10 other companies are all doing the same thing, all you know, jostling for position with that particular candidate. You've got to, you know, that candidate experience right now is absolutely paramount. You know, high touch, super fast, and engaging. And if you're not doing those things, you're losing out, because the ones that are doing it well are the ones that are getting the success.
Yeah, on that, I mean, we are, I think people become a little bit conditioned to kind of what I call outside in. It's, you know, almost challenging the candidate. What can you give me? And I think a good interview can actually uncover those "what can you do for me" questions. But I think if you accept you're in a competition to attract the best talent to your business, and talent is scarce, then actually, are you applying enough time at the end of the conversation, quite literally, to sit there and actually ask that person if they've got any questions? You know, what would be their concerns, and actually start that onboarding process really, really early. It doesn't make people offers, but I think you've got a moment in time where you can kind of see the color of their eyes on the video, and actually wash away some of those concerns, because that sense of being person to person or face to face is lost. So I think people will put the phone down or kind of close the video down with questions and concerns, and they won't necessarily air them in that conversation. So I think if clients really work out that they need to attract people to their business and actually take a bit more time to actually almost sell your business to them, this, for want of a better word, this kind of sense of, you know, they'll do well to come and work here. honestly, they're going to have 6, 7 other conversations that actually it's not going to feel as difficult, to be perfectly frank. And you know that talent is scarce. So actually make them feel wanted, sell the job, sell the opportunity, sell the kind of work, sell the roadmap, you know, what's going to happen down the track. Actually paint a really, really positive picture. It still doesn't mean you make an offer to somebody, but actually, do you know what? You're starting to open up your world to them. And invariably, you're going to do it on video. So this is a great first opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've worked with clients where that kind of onboarding process, you know, pre-offer, we're not kind of down that road yet, but they are talking about what the onboarding elements look like, what week 1, week 4, kind of month 2, 3, and 4, and onwards. They all look like, what the training and development plans look like if you're an employee. They are, like you say, there's a number of years where you've worked with clients or candidates that come out of interviews and have actually said, well, you know, it was all about, the questions were just fired at me. There was no kind of sales kind of element from the client. They didn't tell me how good their business was, what the plans were, like you say, what roadmaps look like. So that's a massive point. I think right now companies have to sell themselves better. What
is the future of remote working in 2022? Well, I think what it definitely is remote working is here to stay. There's no sense in kind of reminiscing back kind of pre-COVID and thinking that we're going to end up back in that place, because we're quite simply not. The Pandora's box is certainly open, and I think more importantly, if our clients could actually hear the conversations we have with candidates, it's really interesting that, you know, we always said once upon a time that salary was never the main thing, and it certainly wasn't in lots of conversations we had. It was often kind of culture and work-life balance, but they were almost a little bit undefined, and they were unsaid questions, and people kind of wanted to learn a little bit about it. I think right now, the first question we are asked, undoubtedly, and I would say as high as kind of 90% of the time, is it remote working or isn't it? If it's hybrid, what is hybrid? And I think we've got to get out of the habit of actually using the word remote working if fundamentally we mean it's 4 days in the office or 1 at home. Remote working for us, or full-time remote working, means exactly that, accompanied with an employment contract that says you're contracted to be at home. Should you be in an office, we'll expense you to come to the office, or it's 2 days or 3 days. But I think this kind of ambiguous, we'll see where we land after COVID. I think, listen, if nothing else, COVID is not going away anytime fast. So I think candidates are now making their decisions on whether clients are really, really clear on what remote working actually is. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what remote working looks like. But first and foremost is just really encourage people to lose the ambiguous, it's a bit of this and a bit of that. I think people actually want tangible contracts that stipulate it looks like this, and it's quite definite.
Yeah, I think you know, that's what we saw, isn't it? There was some companies, they quickly adopted remote working during the pandemic, and others have embraced it slowly and reluctantly. But going forward, businesses have to move to some sort of remote working policy. And policy being the operative word there, because, you know, we're already seeing sort of, you know, potential future lockdowns and other variants, things like that. But even that aside, you know, as we've just talked about, that, you know, employees expecting now, because we all know the benefits of working from home. We're now shifting into the disadvantages and challenges of remote working, and the mental health aspects and being isolated and things like that. So what we're seeing is a shift towards, you know, structured policies. There are lots and lots of people out there, hence why they're asking what's the remote working policy, that are currently working at home with no remote working policy. So they are at the mercy of the organisation. If they decide to say, right, we're going to come back to the office, there's nothing they can do about that, okay? Because there's no formal policy in place to support that. So people are now looking to move to employers where there is a formal policy in place, okay? Even if it's only 2 or 3 days a week from home, or even 1 day a week from home, it's a formal policy, something that people can work their lives around. People cannot work their lives around working in an office full time, because we spent 2 years not doing that. So it's important that that we see that, and organisations get their ducks in a row when it comes to remote working policies.
Just smiling to myself, because I was just thinking that, as you both know, I'm not the biggest fan of the phrase "the Great Resignation," but let me just say this: if you ask your staff to come back into the office 4 days a week, you will see the Great Resignation, and that's a fact. You know, people invariably will not want to come back into the office, and there's so many other opportunities out there now that give them that true work-life balance, and I mean serious work-life balance, where at 5:30 or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, pick the kids up, walk the dog. That kind of flexible work style, it's actually being used in some organisations without punishment, and we're still getting kind of horror stories of these kind of 9-10 hour days sitting on your own in your own home office with the manager kind of cranking it out. You're going to lose people. I mean, it's just not that appealing, and it just isn't modern, comparable with other jobs and companies that we're seeing. And if you're like that, we just kind of implore you not to be, because you will lose those people. Because there's so many other attractive opportunities out there where companies have really worked out what remote working looks like.
That's a good guess. On the Pete, you mentioned kind of well-being there, and I think companies need to have a really well-structured kind of, I suppose, touch point, you know, how they kind of interact with their staff when they're remote, that engagement piece we discussed earlier in the conversation. I think not just work related, not just kind of what have you done, how's the day going, it's more about that social element. I know we found as a business through lockdown that regular, I suppose, non-work, you know, a bit of a laugh and a joke, quiz nights, magicians, all of those kind of seemingly kind of, you know, quite small things, but they mean a lot to people when they're at a distance, and they might not have any extended family around them, they might live alone, you know. So I think those elements, the softer piece, is really, really important. It's almost as important as the kind of that kind of flexibility around hours and that side.
100%, Mark. And I think that's a really really important point, as organizations maybe look to become more remote working. Actually, you know, some of them have just, you know, the gloves are off, they've gone, do you know what, we're engaging all of this great talent, and they're dotted all around the country. You know, why would we stop? And in some cases they've been able to recruit people cheaper as they're based further north in the UK, and we're starting to see this leveling up going on across the country, but that's another point. But the point I was making is truly how do you onboard remote people properly into your culture? Because, you know, that's what the office was, you know, it almost sorted itself out, didn't it? You recruit people and the culture sort of develops it with, you know, with your appropriate leaders driving it in certain aspects and having certain cultures and values and things like that. But how do you influence people? You know, you can't go into their house and write your wacky value statement on the wall saying, you know, we all look after each other in their kitchen. You know, that's what the office environment created. Whereas now you've got these people working in their own in their own houses. You know, they're often alone. They're not really interacting unless it's on Teams. You know, when they switch that off, they go back to doing whatever they want to do. So, you know, hiring and onboarding people into your culture, into your values, your way of working, and then supporting them through that is a real tricky task. And I can see as organizations recruiting people specifically to look after that aspect of remote workers.
It's funny you say that, because I just wrote down, we're actually working a job at the minute called a developer relations manager, and anyone kind of technical or as dev teams in their businesses will understand that job. But it's about building communities. It's about understanding a developer community, kind of what's next. It's about kind of looking ahead in terms of the technical stack or what people want to learn next, or actually bringing people together and actually almost having that that person that looks after your business's mental health. And I mean your business's mental health, and then collectively. And I think you've got to get out of the habit of saying the 30th we have a quiz and it's just another bloody quiz. You know, there will be occasions where people will happily come down to London or into your office, wherever you are around the country, for a social. In fact, they'll welcome the opportunity. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to come into the office to work. And I think there's things that we can do over the course of the next year that really works out what remote working is. And you can bring people into the office socially for lunch on a Friday once a month, for example. Now, not everyone will come for various reasons, but there are other things that we can do once we really commit that we've got people that don't work within the immediate location of our business. It may well be that actually you take the business on tour and actually go up towards where they're based, or down towards where they're based. But I think we've got to have a bit of innovation and EVPs have got to be redesigned almost. I think the EVP that you once had, I think if you're completely honest and reviewed it today, it's no longer relevant. I don't think it's necessarily you chuck your culture out with that, but I do think that people have got to challenge themselves and say, what is our EVP, and actually is it for the moment? And I think the quicker some companies really position themselves in that space, not only will they feel more comfortable selling it, but I think the staff will feel more comfortable knowing they want to be in it. I just get the sense at the minute we're kind of teeter on the edge of no one's quite sure. We've definitely got some clients that have nailed it, and actually it looks like what it is, and it feels comfortable. It's easy for us to sell. It's easy for them to kind of interview people within that structure. And then you've got other companies that are still kind of, no one's quite convinced. People come away from the interview unconvinced. The line managers are not quite convinced. They're scared of saying something if they're not backed up by the CEO or the HR team or whatever it looks like. So I think everything just becomes a little bit too grey. And then the only tool you've got left really is, well, I'll give you 10 grand more, I'll give you 20 grand more. And all of a sudden, that becomes appealing, because who doesn't want a big pay rise? But fundamentally, is that person onboarded to your business for the 20 grand pay rise, or because they actually want to join your business? And trust us, they'll leave for another £2,000 the next time the call comes in, because they're not engaged or loyal to your brand and your business and ultimately your culture. So I think companies, remotely or not, have got to work out, and I suspect it'll be difficult. I mean, it's difficult enough in our own business, but I think people have got to work out what their new culture is, and then actually really understand it, and then actually share it out to people. And it may well be a little bit different than what it was. But interestingly, I think once you understand it, everything actually falls into place so much easier.
Yeah, that is a good point. We spoke about culture quite a lot over the last kind of 20 minutes or so, and kind of, I suppose, you've mentioned, Gaz, about kind of how companies have nailed it. They truly understand what their culture is, and how to measure it. And that's what we've struggled with. If you talk to certain clients, when you ask them to really nail down what their culture is, what their, I suppose, values are and key behaviors within their business, they can't do it. That's why they say when we're building out psychometrics to some of the clients we work extensively with, that's a really good tool to measure potential candidates, because they know exactly what they're looking for. Whereas you try and do that for a client that it has that ambiguity around what they want, then it's almost impossible. You're just kind of, it's almost pointless using the tool, isn't it, really?
Well, it is pointless, because people, I think, interesting, you ask 5 or 6 people, you'll get a different sense of what the culture is. Yeah. So, an undefined culture, actually, you're almost left then to the instinct of the hiring manager. And if that hiring manager doesn't live and breathe your particular culture, then whose culture are they hiring into? Are they hiring into the company's culture or that particular line manager's culture? So I think actually EVP culture, I think actually they all come into play quite strongly in 22, because candidates will be a little bit wiser after actually going through lots of interviews, what a good interview looks like and what a bad one looks like. We used to say contractors were the best interviewers because they interviewed so often, but permanent people are great interviewers these days because they've got so many opportunities to interview.
I think on the culture side, I think what we will see, and we're already seeing it, is that organisations are no longer restricted to the environment around them or the 20-mile radius around them. So to a certain extent, the whole diversity and inclusion piece within those organisations were always restricted to within that 20-30-mile radius, right? And available skills, the right people, etc., accessibility. Whereas now, jobs are now available to everybody, anywhere in the UK. So, whether that's down to a disability, whether it's just down to location, there's all sorts of reasons why all people couldn't take certain jobs. Whereas now that's available to them. Tech is better than it's ever been. There's no excuse not to hire somebody that needs additional support in the organisation because they have the skills. We've talked a lot about not having the available skills, but the skills are out there. We just need to look. Now we can look further afield. We'll see organisations immediately become more diverse organisations, which means those EVPs need to suit a diverse range of people. Offering a gym membership is not suitable for everybody, right? If you're going into an office, it's just not suitable for everybody. But different ways of doing things, whether it's down to race, religion, you name it. You know, there's opportunities. You can expand your EVP to support your culture in different parts of the country that will attract people to your organisation because it's individual to them.
Well, I think that whole upskilling bit, the learning, the development bit. I mean, people have never spent as much time at home, and particularly so at the minute. But actually, with access to training, upskilling themselves, the kind of logistics of going on a training course for a week, you know, they're not issues that people have to address any longer. You could do an online course in 3 days from your home. It's not going to cost the company anywhere near as much money as it once did. You know, companies that really work out about upskilling and learning and development programs or on learning portals and the like, you know, we've got one in our business, and it gets used all of the time, and people will do obscure courses, but fundamentally they're sitting at home. Why not do an obscure course? Because they're interested in upskilling themselves. So there's a whole ecosystem of benefits that you can actually give to people online. It doesn't get away from the fact that at some stage people will want face-to-face interaction, undoubtedly. But I think a blend of both is probably fit for the market that we're now in, and maybe fit for the 22 we're just about to enter into.
I'll kick this one off. We've talked a lot about you know, skills shortage, and yet there's lots of candidates. We all know there's lots of candidates out there being interviewed. You know, but for one reason or another, they're not getting the job, right? Which suggests that right now, skills are way more important than necessarily talent or cultural fit in an organisation. And in a tech-driven world, you know, you can understand that, but because everyone's trying to recruit, everyone's trying to get ahead at the moment. So the quickest thing to sort that is to use skilled contract labour. And yet there's still a hesitancy to do that. And there's lots of reasons for that. Right? You know, the changes in the IR35 rules and regulations, and also the cost of doing that. But what we've seen is the organisations that are really truly behind that are actually saving themselves money longer term. Yes, they're paying a premium for those skills right now, but those skills they can stop at any given time. They tend to deliver the work faster because they're experts in their field, and yet there's still a hesitancy across some organisations not to use that labour. Again, the organisations that are charging forward are ones that are using that blended approach. They're recruiting permanent people that fit their business for the long term, and they're recruiting contract labour to fit the skills that they need right now. And for those that are mixing that sort of short and mid-term strategies together are the ones that are really firing forward on all cylinders.
I think we've had a really, I mean, we as recruiters have been waiting for the contract tap to be turned on, and it's not really happened this year. And I suspect for lots and lots of reasons. But I think what has happened definitely is the candidates that were effectively in permanent roles, or contractors in permanent roles, have probably gone into true permanent roles. But there are still undoubtedly a vast amount of really highly skilled contractors that are professional contractors, and they are not kind of jumping into a permanent role. They're sitting waiting for the market to turn again. They're probably wise enough and old enough and been around enough to have kind of seen a couple of circles of recessions and the like, and they know that it comes back. But I think interestingly, there are, as you say, Pete, just a vast array of available skills at the minute from professional contractors that actually will come in and respect your business, will probably do some knowledge transfer, will probably deliver something really, really quickly, and they won't actually mind when the contract finishes. They're quite happy to roll off a contract once the job's done. And I think, you know, companies are continuing to kind of tread the same path to try and hire a perm person. They have them for 8 months. You know, at some stage, something has got to break. Either you're something's not happening in your business and something's not getting done, or a project isn't getting launched or completed, or there's a tech that's actually sitting there that nothing's happening with. And if the only kind of reason that that's not happening is because of IR35, then quite simply, you know, without selling to anybody, come and talk to us, because we'll talk you how to do that through that. It's quite easy. But I think more interestingly, as perm salaries have gone up, if anything, the contracting market has actually compressed. So right now, I know, you know, no contractor will thank me for saying it, but contractors are bloody good value. And to some degree, there is a real pool of available talent literally sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. And I think if it's an education piece around IR35, then talk to us, because we're informed about it. We've kind of got all the mechanisms in place and the products ready to go. I think candidates invariably have worked out what it looks like for them, and they understand it. We just really need to kind of sell that to clients to let them understand how to actually work through it. But if you are struggling for skills, there is undoubtedly a whole pool of available candidates there at the minute, which is frustrating from us because we can see them. We're talking to them every day. And often we're kind of almost wishing for the client to sit there and say, well, I'll take a contractor. And we know that we've got immediately available people that can actually fill that particular gap, even if it gets us over this 6-month hump.
No, it's a good point, Gaz. I think that lack of understanding of the legislation, how it impacts you as a business, and I suppose getting accurate determinations in place is what's causing a lot of hesitancy. I've spoken to numerous clients. I've run polls and surveys where you've got certain clients who are engaging with the legislation correctly. They're kind of getting their determinations, not just using kind of random, tools as such, but they're getting really robust determinations that are kind of either outside or inside, as the case may be. But if they're getting the outside ones, then they're pushing through, creating outputs, deliverables. They understand that the legislation and their obligations against that. I think where clients are reluctant to try and understand it are perhaps not willing to really understand or engage with the legislation, engage with suppliers that can advise them. I think that's what's causing a bit of a bottleneck. And then there are some people that literally just kind of, they're kind of, I suppose, going the other way, where they're not bothering to engage with the legislation, but they're still hiring, which is quite dangerous, I think, for them long term.
Some has to give. I mean, we've had some jobs in our business for months and months on end, and you kind of almost know that we're never going to fill that job. And the reason is they're probably not paying the right salary. The salaries have now gone past that particular point. And you kind of know for 4 or 5 months that you struggle to fill that job, and you've tried to educate the client and try to explain what it looks like. But there's nothing to suggest in the next 4 or 5 months they're going to fill that job. You tend to end up falling into a kind of luck more than judgment recruitment piece. Whereas I think, interestingly, you could probably move your business on by 6 months with a hire of a contractor, probably would have made a lot more happen. And it's quite likely that in 6 months' time, the opportunity in the role might look a bit different. You're not necessarily hiring at the top of the tree. You can actually hire someone with a lesser skill because some of that early work has already been done.
Yeah, especially if you do that knowledge transfer bit in the middle as well.
I think you kind of maybe just be a bit more strategic about resourcing plans and use contractors for the very reason they exist, for kind of short, sharp kind of implementations and work in your business, and actually help you make an incremental step forwards.
I think that's a part of the problem, is that organisations aren't particularly strategic in their resourcing plans, and actually it's easier for them to outsource it to a managed service provider because that's easier to manage than it is to manage 3 or 4 contractors, or bring in an interim, because if it's a perm person, you sit there and you manage them every day, right? Whereas if it's a contractor, sort of no one really knows lines of engagement. There's sometimes not strength in the organisation. There's no structure in place for that sort of project management aspect of it. And sometimes it's, even though it costs more money to outsource it to a managed service provider or a consultancy, they'd rather pay that premium because there's more of a business-to-business relationship as a more than a one-to-one relationship. And that often comes up quite a lot, is that it's too much hassle. I don't really know what to do. They don't know where to go with that. So, working with a recognised supplier, somebody who has experience of managing consultancy partners, is somewhere where you can get that additional resource. And we obviously have a solution that
I was going to say, Peter, I mean, and again, it truly isn't a reason to sell a product, but everything we're talking about, which is kind of coming out of a conversation, is kind of good high-end proper contracting, or once people used to call interim management, a really set of defined deliverables at the beginning, mid-assignment reporting, end-assignment reporting, knowledge transfer. Candidates in the market today who regard themselves as professional contractors will not want to do that. They'll actually like to do that. They want to do that. They actually want to earn, they want to provide more service. I think gone are the days where someone's kind of prepared to come in, almost keep their particular skill set a secret and not tell anybody else in the hope that they'll get another 6-month extension. I genuinely think that kind of contractors kind of moved away from the market. I don't think that defines a professional contractor. So I think you're almost getting professional services at day rate contractor rates. And trust us, we know that there's a vast difference. You know, invariably that's a third cheaper. It may well be that you get your thing done so much quicker with some trusted experts who know what they're doing. You might actually find that you get to where you want to get to kind of as quicker than you would have done by trying to hire a permanent person. You've got to go through that learning curve. You've got to go through that cultural bit that we've talked about. So I think, you know, to say the word again, I think being more strategic about your resourcing actually will enable you to get things done so much quicker. And that kind of works with the current market we're sitting in, because if you're hoping to stumble across the next brilliant piece of talent tomorrow, you know, the likelihood is you're not going to. You know, they are going to remain hard to find. So what else can you do? And this is one of the kind of levers you've got at your kind of exposure to pull against.
Yeah, that is a good point. We've spoken about role definition before. That strategic planning piece is critical in any kind, especially an outside role. Defining that piece of work. Gone are the days where you would just simply take an old perm job spec and say, right, I need a PM for 6 months. It's a lot more involved in that up front, which is kind of putting some clients off. But once you've done that kind of labor intensive week or 2 weeks to really define the piece of work you want, the outputs, the deliverables, when you expect them done by, what the reporting process looks like, then you've just let that kind of contractor. And as you say, Gaz, I think if anything, that extra rigor around what you expect will wash out the less kind of or less high caliber contractors, and will bring the real consultants.
Let's face it, Mark. You know what you're paying for. You kind of, it's like leaving your car at the mechanics and saying, you know, fix it, and you know, coming back with an open checkbook and saying I'll pay whatever. I mean, you know, that was contracting once upon a time, and you know, now you wouldn't dare giving your car to a mechanic and sit sitting there, well, you know, fix it. You kind of want to know, you know, what are you going to do, what are you going to put in there, how much is it going to cost me, and when can I pick it up, and how much is the whole thing going to. Now that definition, that kind of a sense of that's what I get for my return on investment. Ironically, IR35 has kind of driven that to happen now. So if nothing else, it would prove sensible to actually probably go through that process a couple of times and sit there and say, well, you know, if that whole thing's going to cost me 10 grand, strangely in my mind, I thought it was going to cost me 100. It may well be that you're kind of enlightened quite quickly what's possible in this market.
I mean, there's also the other piece that we're kind of we have access to is that kind of project assurance. If you, as a client, if you're not willing to, or you don't have the appetite to manage that contract assignment, there's kind of extra levels of service that can be put in place to take that headache away. That kind of extra, I suppose, assurance element across the whole piece, putting in place your reporting process, managing the outputs on your behalf. I mean, they're all kind of critical elements without going to that full, you know, 1,500, £2,000 a day consultancy fee level.
Absolutely. In fact, we've done that quite successfully on a few occasions this year. It's, I think it's interesting that you've almost brought full consultancy services in for half the cost. Yeah. And often people are almost managing the homework of something they don't quite understand, which clearly can kind of lead to issues. But I think us plugging in the consultancy almost overview and project assurance piece actually helps everybody kind of make sure that people are keeping to the set of deliverables that we all agreed at the beginning. And quite simply, if people are going off on tangent or actually not delivering what you effectively set out at the beginning, you know, then all of the different caveats of the contract kick into effect. You know, we'll stop the contract, or we reset, or we kind of redefine actually what it is that they're doing. But I just think there's a load more levers that now are available to clients in the contracting market than they probably had before. You know, once upon a time, I'm going to use the 5-day notice period to kind of get rid of someone because they weren't working. Again, it's a pretty blunt tool to kind of get what you need out of the relationship.
Yeah, and that was typically done when they were 2, 3, 4 months into the contract. They finally realised that the outputs weren't there.
It's getting too expensive. You can't see the end. You know, you don't quite know what you're getting for your money.
Yeah. Whereas if you've got a much more robust process, you'll see these issues early on, and you'll either deal with them, rectify them. The contractor will either have to rectify them at their own cost because they're on the hook for the financial side as well, or you actually, do you know what, you do end up terminating someone, but you know, you've saved yourself 2 or 3 months worth of kind of overhead.
I certainly see contracting coming back strong in, I'm kind of in my mind, it's Q1 next year, but it may well be kind of Q1, Q2. But I think at some point, companies will fall out of the BAU state that they've been in to kind of reset and stabilize after COVID. But I think projects and transformation will kick into effect again. I think definitely we're past that first incarnation of digitization. I think we'll now get into kind of product development and services and the like. I think there's a reason to engage contractors into your business, almost to kind of kick you on through that transformation. I hope it's the case, because I would hate for us to see, from a recruiter's perspective, contracting is a great business for us to have, but I actually would hate for the UK to lose its contracting ability. We had undoubtedly the best contracting market in the world, and I really stand by that. I don't think the US, Holland, Germany kind of had something, but it was a little bit, Holland maybe had something a little bit similar, but effectively the UK had a workforce of 250, you know, maybe up to 500,000 true contractors. I think it was a brilliant business place that we had, and I still think it's there. I still think it's an accessible talent pool for people. It would just be awful to lose that particular sector out of our kind of economy. Whereas I actually think that we need to kind of re-liven it up again.
I agree with you, mate. Yeah, on that side, I remember government going through this in 2017, and that took probably 9 to 12 months to go through kind of, and I suppose reset, and then they came out on the other side, and that was kind of, I won't say business as usual, because there was a lot more kind of effort needed up front, but they were the ones, they resurrected that market pretty quickly, certainly within 12 months. Sadly,
on the back of COVID, it's kind of had a double impact, really, isn't it? It's
yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned earlier, Brexit is kind of, it's almost like a triple whammy kind of 2020, wasn't it, really? So yeah, it's done well to kind of cling on.
Yeah.